but the ECCC is not connected in any way to the INDC. I mean, as far as I've seen the minutes of the Executive Committee on Climate Change, and it's very much an NAPCC body.
Okay.
So the discussions were primarily like, let's go mission by mission. What do you need? Where are you? Are you going to meet your targets? I need money. I need this clearance, whatever, right? So that was the general gist of the conversation. And so it's completely removed from the ECCC process. And it's an interesting question. I mean, how do you structure cross-ministerial coordination for an NDC process? It's an interesting question. ECCC was definitely not it. Maybe there was like a very informal bureaucratic process deep in the background where they were just picking up the phone or sending emails to each other, which is not structured or formalized in any way. But the ECCC was not it. There was also the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change, which, to the extent that I know, was more or less defunct by the time the NDC process in Paris rolled around. Right, so that's a pre-Paris construct met during the NAPCC's time. So that's basically So not much to report there on the coordination front, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And has that changed? So is it? Because, I mean, something like a net zero target or just generally as ambition grows, over time, there will be the need for, what people call a more of a whole of government approach or policy integration to be able to actually get the sort of, at least on a mitigation level, get the sort of deep emission cuts necessary to achieve something like a net zero target. So I was just wondering how, because from my sort of, in theory, I would say the biggest, or I would have assumed the biggest benefit of something like an NDC process is to get countries to engage with these sorts of things more holistically on a whole of government level, just because they are forced to come up with a target every 5 years, and then need more and more input from other ministries to ensure that what they promise is actually achievable.
It's on the first part about whether this has changed, whether things have changed. Not that I have seen or not that I know of. I don't think the ECCC. There is a new organization called AIPA, which is the Apex Coordination. Apex. What is it? For Apex Committee for the Implementation of the Paris Agreement or something like that. And so this is essentially the ECCC in new clothing, in the sense that it's again primarily an MOEF run body, though the ECCC was actually run by the Principal Secretary of the Prime Minister. But this is primarily a MOEF type body, and I don't know if it's done a lot. I mean, we haven't seen much happening. Maybe there's something happening behind the scenes. Though there was some fanfare around them creating this. Again, not entirely sure what role it plays, because these are like senior bureaucrats at the joint secretary to secretary level. And it's an implementation organization, and I'm not entirely sure what role they have to play in the NDC. It's not. Actually, let me look up the terms of reference. It's a good question. Do you mind if I quickly take a look at this thing?
Oh, go for it.
So it's the National Authority to Regulate Carbon Markets in India, formulate guidelines for consideration of projects or activities, issue guidelines on carbon pricing, market mechanisms, other similar instruments that have a bearing on climate change NDCs. Contributions of the private sector, bilateral, multilateral agencies will be counted by this thing and provide guidance for aligning their climate action. So it's not in the list of things.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was
again,
that was the indication I got as well when people mentioned the Apex body in the past, that it's more it'll function more on the implementation side and not really on providing input to updating the NDC.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the detailed TOR. I actually pulled up the full notification from Government of India. I was looking at the press release, but here, um, yeah, specifically, I'll send you the link to this. So specifically it says it should coordinate communication and reporting of NDCs to the UNFCCC.
Okay.
And it says provide guidance to NDCs and its accounting for domestic, bilateral, multilateral activities or projects to ensure that they're compliant with cabinet decisions and India's position in international climate negotiations. So yeah, there is a linkage, but at best I would think a loose one. I'm pretty certain this is not where the decisions are being made. I think it's probably a post hoc sort of body. But it's an intriguing question. I mean, we know that they haven't done any of this yet. But whether it happens in the future is actually a bit of an open question. I guess they have enough role to like think about NDCs, but I'm not sure they'll do it if the MOEF is just sort of running the show internally.
So the next thing I'd be interested in is how sort of non-governmental stakeholders are involved in the process, if at all, sort of, including NGOs, but also the private sector. What role do they play? Obviously, I know that there have been some private sector groups that have been involved in the negotiations historically, part of the Indian delegation, but I was just wondering if on a sort of policy formulation level, they are involved at all.
Starting with NGOs and civil society, I think most of the climate space, including with the NDCs, operates with like 4 or 5 organizations in the Delhi circuit, and that's about it. There's it's not a very big family. Mm-hmm. So that's, and again, I mean the Terry thing, and you were suggesting it might even be CSE. So those are the usual suspects, right? So it's going to be these organizations that do it. There is no grassroots consultation, state level consultations as far as I know. It's definitely not a systematic process around the NDCs. And I'd actually be curious to know from you if other countries do go down to the subnational level and talk about NDCs. It'd be very interesting. On the private sector, again, absolutely no indication that the private sector is playing a role in this. But again, I might be wrong because I don't know what happens in like the deep down behind closed doors business. But it's primarily an MOEF thing. MOEF is not deeply linked with private industries too. Mm-hmm. That usually happens like with solar, it happens to the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and so on and so forth. So it's I think just by the nature of the MOEF being the place that puts the NDCs out, it's unlikely there's a lot of private sector intermediation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So to answer your question on what other countries have done, in South Africa there's quite a lot of consultation. It's unclear how effective that is. But formally, there's lots of processes. So the South African NDC both get sent to all ministries for comment, and there's like a sort of formal process for interministerial consultation. And once that has happened, it then gets sent out for public comment and public consultation. And actually, the update, which they're currently working on, I've just been invited. I'm not sure if I can participate, but I've at least been invited to try. To the first public consultation for that'll be next week.
Right.
But what I've heard there is that it's sort of one of these things where South Africa, historically, politically, generally, doesn't matter what topic, has a history of always involving a broad range of stakeholders and a lot of public debate on issues. At the same time, sort of the inside scoop that I've gotten is that in the end, if the Ministry of Environment there, the Department of Environment and Forestry, as they call it, if they decide something should go into the NDC, it's likely to end up in the NDC. Like, as much as there is a consultation process, that is also sort of just an institutionalized way of doing politics in South Africa, not necessarily